Welcome everybody to Hall of Fame Conversations on Mic'd Up Social, presented by Zenni. My name's John Reger, and I'm joined by Barry Smith, FSU football great, NFL wide receiver, and Florida Sports Hall of Fame class of 2022. Today's Mic'd Up Social is brought to you by the folks at the Florida Sports Hall of Fame, celebrating enshrined members of sports since 1961. Our goal today is to have a casual, informed, and fun conversation for our viewers. Let's introduce Gary Koch, who's had a great career in the game of golf, starting with junior golf, college golf, go Gators, PGA Tour champions, golf course designer, broadcaster, needle mover for the first tee, and recipient of the Payne Stewart Award. Let's welcome Gary Koch, Florida Sports Hall of Fame class of 2012.
Well, guys, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. Look forward to some fun conversation here this afternoon.
Well, Barry, why don't you lead us off with a question? Now, we don't have to go chronologically. We can jump off. We don't have to go back to when Gary was 8 years old and winning the Florida Open, those kind of things.
Well, it's fun. I've known Gary for a long time. Even before I met him, you knew who Gary Koch was just because of his achievements out on the golf course. But also, since I've been here since 1976, started with the Bucks, everybody knows that he went to King High School, grew up in Temple Terrace, and he's a Tampanian, and he's a Gator. Well, I didn't realize that, Gary, you were born in Baton Rouge.
Barry, yeah, I was, Barry.
Right, Baton Rouge. So I guess that question is, I want to know how you wound up in Tampa, Florida, because you could have been a coon ass with the LSU Bengal Tigers.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I'll tell you a little story a little later. I came very close to going to play college golf at LSU. But my father was an engineer, and we came to Florida, drove to Florida from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on a vacation during the summer after my first grade year. We kind of went all up and down the west coast of Florida, and he fell in love with the Sarasota area and arranged to actually gain employment with the Arvida Corporation, which at the time was developing both Bird Key in Sarasota and also Longboat Key. So he kind of moved to Sarasota. We went back. I finished up my second grade year in elementary school there in Baton Rouge. And then we moved, my mom and I moved to join him in Sarasota. That was 1960. And that's where I first started playing golf. I was typical 8-year-old kid kind of hanging around in the summer with nothing to do. Didn't know anybody because I was brand new in town. My mom took me to the city recreation department, and they were having a golf clinic. The gentleman from Bobby Jones Municipal, the head pro there by the name of Pat Hall, was running this golf clinic. And I was an only child, and there was something about golf that just appealed to me because I could do it by myself. And I pretty quickly fell in love with it. We ended up moving to Tampa in 1968. And again, that was in conjunction with my dad and his job. They finished the development of Longboat Key, they had already finished Bird Key. Then they did the golf course at Longboat Key and the hotel there and everything else. He ended up coming up here to Tampa and getting a job with Griner Engineering. And his first project was the University Community Hospital out on Fowler Avenue. He lived in a trailer during the week there on site and would drive back to Sarasota on Friday afternoons, and then early Monday morning drive back up to Tampa. Well, that lasted for about 6 months, and he said, "To heck with this, we're moving to Tampa." I had started playing, junior golf by that time. Was having some success. I knew Eddie Pierce, I knew Brian Hawk, I knew Philip Reed, the guys who were all playing at King High and all were out in Temple Terrace. Yep. So my dad said, "Well, if we're going to move to Tampa, we might as well move to Temple Terrace. That way you'll have a chance to play with those guys on a regular basis. You can play on the same high school team with them for a couple of years." And that's really how we ended up in Tampa. Now, the LSU story is really good. When I finished high school, of course, I was getting a number of calls and letters from coaches recruiting me to go play college golf. Made a visit out to Houston, which at the time was, one of the top programs in the country. Eddie and I both went to visit Wake Forest, where he ended up going to school. And I took a trip out to LSU, out to Baton Rouge. My parents still had some family friends there. and at the time. So I went ahead and took a visit out there. Well, the coach at the time was a young man by the name of Tommy Marty. He was about 35 years old. And John, you'll remember this. Back in that day and age, every college golf coach was probably 65 to 75 years old. I mean, they were like granddads to, an 18-year-old. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
this Tommy Marty was like 35, and he just kind of, there was something about having a youthful coach that was appealing. And I was seriously thinking about going to LSU. We could sign April 1 to a scholarship. He called me about 2 weeks before that and said, Gary, I just wanted to let you know I've had an opportunity in the golf industry. He ended up going into helping form a club management company, John, after all that. And he goes, I just wanted to let you know I'm not going to be the coach. You could sign, and by next fall, I won't be here, which was very nice of him to say, because he could have easily signed me and then left. Once I got that information, then it became very easy for me to go ahead and sign and play at the University of Florida, close to home, but just far enough away you could be a college kid.
Right.
One thing I remember about you from our days at the Bloomingdale Golfers Club, back in the,
Mm-hmm.
80s and early 90s, was that I think you came by one day and you brought like a big trunk full of junior golf trophies that you'd won.
Mm-hmm.
And what you did is that, I don't know, is if you were moving into another house and your wife was like, hey, you got to move some of this hardware out. But that was quite a gesture to do that, because we would take off the strips on the front of them, and then
Sure. Be able to,
re-engrave them and give them out
right.
for junior golf trophies.
Right.
Nowadays, with the technology and what junior golf has, they would frown up at that, but that was really kind of cool when you give a
Yeah.
trophy away that Gary Koch won.
Yeah.
And that,
Yeah.
so they, that was pretty cool. But hey, one of the things I want to talk about is your college golf career, in the sense that you won the national championship, and you had quite a few characters on your team when you won that. So tell us a little bit. And the
Yeah.
Gators just won the national golf championship, NCAA's, this past year. Tell us about your time on the University of Florida golf team.
Well, once I decided to go to Florida, which, like I say, became a very easy decision with the LSU situation, I joined a team that was already very good. Andy North, who would go on to win 2 U.S. Opens, was playing there. Mike Killian from St. Petersburg, Florida, had gone to Houston to start his college career and transferred back to the University of Florida. Mike would end up being on a Walker Cup team with me in 1973. Was a great player. We had Jimmy Smith, who is a kind of a local guy from the Bay Area. He's a Clearwater guy. He was the national junior college champion before he transferred to Florida. So there were a number of really good players already there when I got there. It was interesting. My freshman year, we went out to Tucson to play in the NCAA Championship. We were right there with just a few holes to go on the final round on the 72-hole stroke play event, and we had a really hard time finishing. I don't know if you're familiar with Tucson National or not, but the 18th hole is a long par 4 with water on both the right and left sides. Our 4 counters, think on that final day, John, scored triple bogey, double bogey, and bogey.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. There went the
Barry and
NCAA.
I, we would just lay up and
Right.
take our double
You got
bogey and
that
go
right.
on.
Right. Well, there went the NCAA championship. We ended up finishing third. Ben Crenshaw shot 65 in the final round to win the first of his 3 NCAA's individual titles. And we finished third. So we knew we had a good team. Well, the next year, my sophomore year, we played at Cape Coral down in Fort Myers. And of course, Texas had their whole team coming back, so they were kind of favored. Houston was still very good. And we did not have a great week. We just didn't play particularly well, and finished third again. It was interesting. About that time frame, Andy Bean came along and joined our team. We had a couple other guys, Woody Blackburn, who would end up winning on the PGA Tour, came along, and then so did Phil Hancock, who would also win on the PGA Tour later in his career. They all came in, and even though to me we weren't as talented a team my junior year. We were more of a team. We just did everything together, practiced together, played together, went out at night together, just we did everything. And consequently, we really gelled. And we had a great year my junior year. I think we won 5 or 6 tournaments, including the SEC championship. We went out to Stillwater, Oklahoma to play in the NCAA championship. Good story there. So Laban Harris, senior, had been the coach at Oklahoma State for like 30 years and had never won the NCAA championship. He had had numerous first team All-Americans and guys who had gone on to play successfully on the PGA Tour, but had never won an NCAA. He announces his retirement. So the NCAA decided to let them host the NCAA golf championship on their home course.
Wow.
So,
Nice.
so we go out there and, we're confident. We've had a great season. Like I said, we won the SEC very easily. I had won the individual title for the SEC. And we get there the night before the first round. We're at a barbecue out at the club. So our team's at a picnic table and kind of not right next to us, but close enough to us that we could hear what was going on was the Oklahoma State team. And we heard this coach, Laban Harris, say to his team, "We don't have to worry about Florida. We've got them on our turf." And
Uh,
that was a big
that's
mistake.
locker room material right there.
Yeah, exactly. And don't worry, our coach Buster Bishop was a little 5'6" feisty little guy that had been a high school football coach, and he knew just how to use that. And we were
Yep.
very motivated. We ended up winning. We beat Oklahoma State on their home course by 10 shots. I finished second in the individual to Crenshaw, who won for the third time. And, it was just a great year. My senior year, John, we returned everybody. I mean, and we actually added Denny Sullivan, who had won the National Junior College Championship the year before. So, if anything, we were every bit as good and maybe even better than when we had won in '73. So another great year. We won 4 or 5 more tournaments. We won the SEC championship again. I won the individual again. And we go to San Diego to a place called Carlton Oaks outside of San Diego. Worst conditioned golf course I've ever seen for a big event. And we had the lead going into the final day. And Andy Bean really struggled on the front 9. He shot 41. And then we had this kid, Denny Sullivan, who was the National Junior College champ, shot 41 on the back 9 on the final day. I was playing in the final group with Curtis Strange. We came to the 18th hole, a par 5. Curtis and I were tied for the individual, and we were 1 shot behind in the team competition. I hit driver 3-wood just over the back of the green. Curtis hit a 1-iron from about 220 yards to 12 feet. I chipped down to a foot, tapped in, and then Curtis made his 12-footer to beat me by a shot and to win the team by 2. And it was a great Wake Forest team. It was Jay Haas and Bob
Yep.
Byman and David Thor. I mean, they were good. They had won the ACC tournament earlier that year, but we really felt like we had let one get away, which was kind of a sad way to wrap up a college career. But when you look back on it now, it was a great 4 years. Probably the best part of it, to be honest, was I went back for an extra quarter to graduate, and I was the assistant golf coach.
Oh, boy.
So all I did was go to football games and make the guys show up on Saturday mornings at 7:00 to tee off after they had been at a fraternity party the night before. So,
Wow.
that was probably the highlight of my 4 years, was that extra quarter. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Hey, one of our Florida Sports Hall of Fame members, class of 2022, is a golfer named Fred Ridley, and I think we all know what kind of career he had. And
Yes.
was
Yes.
he on the team around
So
that time?
John. So Fred was on the team. Fred was always kind of in that 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th man position. Fred would play. He would get into some of the tournaments that we played. But when it came time, it just seemed like he never quite played well enough, to get into, the traveling 5 to go to the SEC or to the NCAA. Good player, very good player. If he'd have been somewhere else, he'd have probably been, one of the starters, no question. But I will give Fred a lot of credit. And Fred and I were roommates for 2 different stints, one in an apartment with 2 other guys, and then also at the SAE fraternity house for a while, which was quite interesting. There were some,
Phi Alpha.
some pretty good
Right.
stories there. Yes, Phi Alpha.
Are you an SAE?
I am an SAE. Yes,
So am
sir.
I. Phi Alpha.
Well, Phi Alpha, very good.
Well, hey,
Um,
hey, both you guys, I was that close. At the 11th hour, I wound up. Anyways, I'm a Pike. I was
okay.
close to
Yeah.
SAE. A lot of people think I was, but I didn't.
All
Okay.
right.
There was a
So
curveball at the 11th hour. Let's just put it that way. So,
I understand. Better offer.
yeah, better offer. Better.
Well,
Hey,
so yeah,
Gary, here's a
sure.
question I got for you. All right, being that obviously I went to Florida State and spent a lot of time in Tallahassee in the off season from Green Bay and Tampa and all that stuff. I was fortunate. I got to play in a couple Tallahassee Open Pro-Ams.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking back in 76, 77, you probably were playing in some of those.
Well, as a matter of fact, Barry, the 1976 Tallahassee Open was my first win on the PGA Tour.
See, it was wow, that. Congrats!
Yeah.
I
So
played in
I
the
thought
pro.
it was very ironic for a Gator to win in Tallahassee, but I was very smart. If you go back and look at the picture, I have on like a garnet colored shirt.
I'm going to check that because the turn.
There's a
Yep.
very good picture of my wife and I with big ass smiles on our faces because I had just won $16,000 and we thought we were rich.
Yep.
But I have on a garnet shirt, and I don't have any gold on. I will say that, but I did
Right.
have a garnet shirt on. I wasn't. I was smart enough to not wear orange and blue in Tallahassee at the Tallahassee Open.
That was a wise move. Because the tournament was played on at Killarn.
Killarn, yes.
Yep, played at Killarn. One year I played with Hubert Green, and one year I played
Mm-hmm.
with Jeff Sluman. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah,
pro.
both FSU guys. Sure. Yeah, yeah. I
Both,
understand.
I
Yeah.
was lucky to get paired with them. The one thing I can remember, when you play with some of your buddies and you're teeing it off, and there's a few people around, you don't get nervous. And I do remember when you teed off, and I was teeing off with Hubert Green, the line of people, the
Mm-hmm.
fans that were lined up, and I got to
Mm-hmm.
tell you, I was never, I played pro football, was never that nervous. I was
Sure.
out of my mind, knees knocking and all that kind of stuff. Thank God I didn't whiff it or anything. I actually hit a pretty decent drive back then, but God bless you guys to do that.
We
Well,
know the first time I played in front of a crowd big enough that it would be concerning. What the spooky thing is that when you're on the first tee and there's a crowd there, the people that get further from the first tee down the fairway, they start leaning in. They start leaning in like this to see who's hitting the ball. And I'm just like, I just felt like saying, "Could everybody just take a step back, please?"
Yep.
It's kind of intimidating. I guess, after a while, Gary, you probably don't see any of that. But, when it's your first time, you look at that and you're
Oh,
going,
sure.
someone's going to get killed.
Oh, no doubt about it. One of the first tournaments I played in after I qualified for the tour was the Tucson Open. It was the Joe Garagiola Tucson Open.
Yeah.
So back then it was common for an actor or sports star or whatever to be kind of the host of these events. So they would bring in their buddies. So, there were a number of major league stars that were playing in the Pro-Am at Tucson National. So just like what you were talking about, there were people lining both sides, first tee. And, you've got these amateurs and even some of the baseball players weren't that good at golf. We'd be on the putting green. We'd be watching what was going on the first tee. Somebody would snipe one right into the crowd. Then, somebody go down and they kind of cart them off and first aid would come and somebody would jump right in and take their place and lean right in, and
Yep.
it's like, God, you people, you need to, realize that, these are amateurs and sports stars and celebrities and stuff. They're not golf pros. They don't hit it straight every time. So pretty funny stuff.
Oh my Lord.
So Gary, obviously, great PGA Tour career. I believe 10 wins. In fact, the tour event next week, the Arnold Palmer Invitational, you've been a past champion. And if you were going to sum up your PGA Tour career as far as what that experience was like then, as you would compare it to today, I mean, as far as because obviously things were a lot different. Not that they were that old, but now we're talking, you played on the tour 70s, 80s, 90s.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, well, the Bay Hill win was 40 years ago this year.
Wow.
1984. So, yeah, it was different, John. I mean, look, it was a privilege to play on the PGA Tour. Back then, it was more a way to make a living. The very top players, maybe your top, I don't know, 10, 15 players made money and actually made, a large amount of money. The rest of us were it was a way to make a living. It was a way to support my family and that. And I was fortunate to get to do it. I mean, a good example that year, 1984, I won twice. I won in San Diego at the Andy Williams Isuzu San Diego Open. How about that for a title of an event?
Well, I remember that commercial.
Isuzu, right. So I won in San Diego, then I won in Bay Hill. I had 6 other top 10 finishes that year, and I finished like 12th on the money list. And I won like 400 and something $1,000, which, in 1984 was great.
Yep.
But you have a year like that now and you win 20 million.
Yep.
I mean, so it's different. It's very different. I get asked all the time, all these guys now have what they call their team. You hear in an interview, well, me and my team, we got this done. So, I'll get asked every now and then, did you guys have teams? I go, yeah, my team was my wife and my caddy. That was the only two I could afford. I mean, we didn't make the kind of money that these guys do now to be able to afford some of the things that they do to help them perform better on the PGA Tour. But, it was a great time. I got to play against Jack Nicklaus and Tom Watson and Lee Trevino and Raymond Floyd and, Gary Player and, some of the true greats of the game. I was fortunate enough to win some tournaments where those guys were all playing. And, when you're in the midst of it, again, having had the college career and amateur career that I did, I probably expected to do better than I actually did. But looking back on it from, afar now, 6 wins is pretty darn good. I mean, there are a lot of guys now that are considered pretty much, if not a superstar, borderline superstar on the PGA Tour. They've got 4 and 5 wins.
Yep.
And, so looking back at it, it was a nice career. I'd love to have done a little bit more, love to have done maybe a little better in some of the majors. I did have top 10s and all. I was the low American in the British Open twice. But that would probably be the biggest thing that I wish I could have done a little better at, was the major championships.
Gary, you got a journalism degree from the University of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me ask you, when you were working on that degree in journalism, were you thinking, down the road that you were going to use that degree to get into broadcasting?
Barry, not one single time did I ever think that. The only reason I had a journalism degree, because there was a course called business calculus. I was in the business, or trying to get into the business school. I wanted to get a business degree.
Right.
And one of the prerequisites was this business calculus course. I signed up for it 3 times. I dropped it 3 times. I was never going to pass this course, ever.
I understand.
And, you had to, we were on quarters back then, and, you had to have so many hours and you had to have a certain grade point to stay eligible. So this business calculus course was like a 4-hour course. I mean, it was a lot of hours. So I'd end up having to drop it. And so finally one day it dawned on me, you know what? If I go into journalism, I have a chance I can kind of BS my way through some of this stuff. But I was never going to make it through that business calculus course. So that's really probably the main reason why I ended up in the journalism school. Ended up with a degree, major was public relations, minor was marketing. And, it just worked out that, after, 15, 16 years of playing, that the opportunity to get into talking about golf came along.
Well, you've had a great career in the broadcasting, and which leads, of course, which John kind of tickled on it, better than most. That is iconic. Every time, I mean, you hear that, it just it's an iconic saying. And was that just thought? Were you thinking about that? How did that happen?
No, it's a great story, Barry, and I'm glad you asked the question. So what, I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but it's a long story. So here we go. So in fact, the Golf Channel ran the replay of it just the other night, the entire 2001 Players Championship. So it was Saturday's round. The pin at 17 was down on the front hole location, which is always the easiest hole location because there's kind of a ridge, a backstop behind the hole, and most of the guys would throw it into the backstop and the ball would roll back down close to the hole. Tiger got to the tee, and for some reason, he picked a 9-iron. And it was like, wow, virtually everybody, especially the longer hitters, had all been hitting pitching wedges. And it was like, why is Tiger hitting this 9-iron? Well, he later said he tried to just chip this little 9-iron to keep the trajectory down, to hit it into the hill to bring it back. Well, it carried up on top and it rolled all the way to the back edge of the green. Very lucky that it didn't go in the water, to be perfectly honest with you. Well, I had seen probably 4 or 5 other players in the course of the round because he was in the next to last group. So I'd been out there all day covering the hole. 4 or 5 players putt from virtually the same spot. All of them had putted off the green. Not one of them had kept the ball on the green. It would come down the slope, off the top level, down the slope. They didn't play enough break. They'd miss the hole to the right, and it would roll into the fringe. So of the 5, there were 4 3-putts and a 4-putt from where Tiger was. So back then, after back then, after the players hit their shots on 17, we would go to commercial because it was a perfect time because it takes, a minute and a half, 2 minutes for them to walk around and to get up onto the green. So we go to commercial. Well, I hit our producer, Tommy Roy, on my talk back, and I said, look, where Tiger's ball is, and I told him what had happened with the guys that I had seen. He goes, great, we'll get back. We'll give you and Johnny a chance to set this up and how hard it is and all that. So we did. And, you can see Tiger kind of standing at the top of the ridge, and you can see him kind of motioning and visualizing. And I'm talking about how, the guys that have putted from there have all, missed the hole to the right, ball's gone down into the fringe, 3 putts, 4-putt. So we do, boom, we got it set up. Tiger's back there, a little one-handed practice strokes, still visualizing. Now he gets over the ball. He hits the ball, and I swear it hadn't rolled 6 feet. And Johnny says, how's that look? Johnny was like that. Johnny, you had to always be on your toes but you never knew when he was going to say something, or ask you something. I mean, you always had to be on your toes. So, right off the top, it was farther left than anybody of the other guys who had putted from there. His ball was farther left. So it was better than most. Well, then it started going down the hill, and it was clearly farther left than any of the others I'd seen. So it was still better than most. Well, all of a sudden it goes in, and then it was clearly better than most. So, the whole thing was kind of started by this stupid question from Johnny. And, if he hadn't asked it, then, I would have never come up with better than most. So it's kind of a funny story, good background, but that was, we were a great team. And that was one of the reasons why we were so good, because the guys around Johnny, I always said Johnny was the star. He was the one out front. We were all just in the back playing a little backup. We were the background guys playing guitar and whatever, and Johnny was the lead singer. But the backup guys had to always be ready because you never knew when the star was going to bring you in. So fortunately, I was ready, and it was clearly just another one of those Tiger moments that was so prevalent at that time in his career. He just did things that nobody else did. And what was great was watching it again. I had forgotten. No one said a word after the putt went in for like 45 seconds, which in television time is an eternity. But we had replays of it. The director was great. He had crowd shots. He had Tiger with that was when he gave the big uppercut, fist pump, and I mean it was an electric moment. It was a Tiger moment, and literally, excuse me, my tower was about 120 yards away. I could feel the hair on my arm standing up. That's how much electricity there was in the air. So it was pretty cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
Hey, Gary, shifting gears here. I host a golf show called On the Tee Florida with Bill Butner, who played
Oh
on the
yeah,
tour
sure.
for a number of years. And Bill was just retired as the golf coach at Eckerd College. And so we were talking about it, and I want to talk to our listeners here about your career as a golf course designer, because I understand that you're going to redesign St. Pete Country Club, and that you had won a
Yep.
tournament there 50 years ago.
50 years ago,
What?
1974, the New Year's Invitational, which they have had there
Wow.
at St. Pete Country Club for over 100 years.
Wow.
It's a long running amateur event, that attracted some great players through the years. I think the first winner was Paul Runyon, who would go on to win a PGA Championship on the PGA Tour. Some really good players. Brant Snedeker is one there. I mean, just on and on. So yes, I won it 50 years ago. They had already made the decision they were going to renovate the golf course, kind of redo it. And out of the clear blue, I get a call from their pro saying, we'd really love to, talk to you and just see if you might be interested in being a consultant for us. So I went over and sat with their committee, and I had a bunch of questions, as they did. They had questions for me, but I had questions for them. What were they looking for? What was their budget? Were they going to be able to actually spend enough money to do this thing right? So we kind of worked together, and I've been over there probably 10 times now in the last 4 or 5 months. We've got a lot of good concepts in place now for the changes. I think we'll make the golf course probably, it won't play any harder for the average player. Hopefully for the guys when they come for that 1 week out of the year and play in the New Year's Invitational, the college kids especially will be challenged a little bit more. We're moving a lot of the fairway bunkers to to where these kids actually hit the ball now, starting at about 280, 90 yards and running to 300 plus. Um, the greens will get enlarged, which will be great. They've shrunk through the years like most greens do. You know that,
Yep.
John, and with the mowing patterns and everything, greens tend to get smaller over time, which will be great because it'll create some new hole locations. We'll kind of reconfigure some bunkers so where they fit these new green shapes. And we'll add. I think we've got room to add 3 or 4 new tees to where it'll stretch the golf course out a little bit more for the better players. So should be fun. They're going to start killing grass here coming up very soon, and construction should start by hopefully mid-April.
Nice.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. One of the things about Gary Cook for our listeners out there is the fact that you move the needle in a lot of ways for a lot of organizations, whether it's our local PGA of America chapter, but also more importantly, what you've done for junior golf. I know you have a golf tournament. You have that brand new first tee short course at Rogers
Mhm.
Park. Tell us a little bit about it, because I used to be an executive director for a first tee chapter, and I know that one of the things you have to do is raise money, because you have to do so much for these kids, and it costs a lot of money. And I was really impressed with the first tee at Tampa Bay, because it looks like you had an annual dinner. And I looked at the list of everybody who signs up for that dinner and know that it's well supported. But tell us a little bit about your role with that, with the first tee at Tampa.
Well, so I've loosely been affiliated with it for probably 20 years. Right when it first got started, there was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Michael Cooper who had what he called urban junior golf, and that morphed into the first tee chapter here in Tampa. But it was one of those things that it just never quite seemed to gain any traction. Uh, they had several different people kind of acting as executive director, but they never really had anybody full time that was their sole responsibility. Well, about 12 years ago, they made the decision to affiliate with the YMCA here in Tampa, which is a very strong organization. So once that happened, it became very evident that the Y was kind of insisting that we come up with our own executive director. So we were very fortunate. We were able to get the executive director from the Connecticut First Tee chapter by the name of Ian Baxter. And Ian came in, and there were a couple of us that had been, again, fringe supporters. And we met with Ian and we're so impressed. We said, you know what, now's the time to really try to create a support group to see if we can't really do some good things with our First Tee chapter. So, a gentleman by the name of Troy Fowler and myself kind of went to work. Troy's very connected. I got a hold of Bob Basham and Chris Sullivan, the Outback guys who had been very supportive of me through the years. They kind of got on board. We created initially what we called the Friends of the First Tee group. That grew to be about 25 people. And then from there, we just kept plugging and with ideas from Chris and Bob and some of the other very successful people that were part of this friends group. We created a board of directors, of which I have been the chairman now for about 6 years. But one of the ideas that was floated to us by Troy Fowler, he had a very good friend who was part of the First Tee chapter in Charlotte. And Charlotte always did a big dinner at Quail Hollow Country Club, Johnny Harris's place. And they auctioned off a lot of golf trips and, whatever, unusual items, that type thing. They had a nice support group, a big board of directors. So Troy kept saying, we should try this. We should try this here in Tampa. Well, we got to a point where our board was 45 people. So it was like,
Wow.
you know what? Let's try that. Let's see if we can make it work. Our very first guest was Jay Monahan. And it was right after Jay had just taken over as commissioner of PGA Tour. So the format has usually been I do a fireside chat with whoever comes in as our guest. So, we put together auction items and this, that, and the other. The end of the night, we had raised $800,000.
Wow.
Just out of nowhere. I mean, we were all stunned at what had happened. We just had no idea that this thing could be possibly as successful as it was. So, with that success in mind, we moved forward with the next one. We were able to get Jack Nicklaus to come as our honored guest.
Wow.
Jack was fabulous. Spent time with the First Tee kids. Did a fireside chat with me again. We raised right at $1 million that night. We have since gone on to have the governor, DeSantis, was there as a guest one year. I had David Faraday come in as our guest one year. We had Annika Sorenstam last year. So the list of guests has been pretty phenomenal. Last year, we raised with Annika there about $1,300,000. So, our board of directors is now at 57 people. It's just incredible. It really is. And, John, two things, the common theme is they all play golf. They all love golf. And the nice thing is at every one of our fundraising events, we show the supporters what their money is helping to do because we have kids there. We have First Tee members there. They speak about how important the First Tee is in their lives. And, some of the older kids, again, because of the success we've had 3 years ago as a board, we decided to commit to every year to give at least $100,000 in college scholarships to our First Tee kids. This past year, we gave over $125,000 out to and helped some 42 kids. So, you bring those kids back in and they speak to the support groups at various functions. And all of a sudden the people go, wow, we really are making a difference with our support. We're giving these kids an opportunity to shine. And John, so much about the First Tee and the 9 core values, and you're helping them potentially become better people as they grow up, but then you give them the opportunity to further their education. It's really very special. It really is.
So one of my favorite golfers, because I used to wear +4s, is Payne Stewart, who obviously reinvented the +4 out there on the tour. And there's a special award named after him presented by the Southern Company, the Payne Stewart Award. And you were a recipient of that award this past year. And I know that's quite an honor. Tell us a little bit about that award and what it means to you.
Well, the award is very special, no question. It has to do with character. It has to do with sportsmanship. It has to do with commitment to charity and helping to improve the lives of others. I was talking to Peter Jacobson about it after I was informed that I was going to be a winner last year, and Peter said, it's interesting because the Hall of Fame you play your way into. He said, this award you're voted the winner by your peers. So, to know that it was my peers that from the PGA Tour that voted for me to win this award, it was very special. You do a lot of things in life and you try to do things the right way. And obviously now later in my life, you try to help as many people as you can in as many different ways as you can. You never do it for the recognition. You do it because you want to do it. You want to help people and like the first T kids, provide them with an opportunity to better themselves, opportunities that I was fortunate to have. So to win this award, it was interesting. The way I ended up leaving NBC at the end of 2022 was less than satisfying. I felt like, look, I never expected to be on TV forever. I still thought I was very good at what I did when I was told they didn't want me anymore. And I thought the way it was handled was not particularly good. I felt a little disrespected for after giving them 26 years of pretty hard work and doing whatever I was ever asked to do. So I almost felt like I was kind of leaving golf, especially my association with the PGA Tour on kind of a down note. But after hearing that, I was going to receive this Payne Stewart Award, going to the ceremony in Atlanta, seeing the support from the previous winners, there were probably 8 or 9 of the current players that were there that evening, Scotty Scheffler and Jordan Spieth, who I know very well, and to see those guys there and to receive the congratulations from them. I think I concluded my speech that night with, and I still believe this with all my heart, that winning that award was clearly the highlight of my career. So now all of a sudden I feel like I can kind of walk away, with my head held very high and on a very high note.
As you should, my friend. Hey, John, don't we have some questions for Gary?
Yeah, we do. We have some questions that have been recorded. So I've got 2 questions to play. One is
Okay.
from Jason Demers, and the next question will be from Rick Barry. So I'm going to go ahead and push the button here, and we're
Okay.
going to play it. Here we go.
Gary, I want to know, what is your single most favorite shot to hit? The shot that when you're on the golf course and you're in your position at your yardage with that specific club where you're like, I'm pin high 2 feet away every time.
Well, if I were pin high 2 feet away every time with any club, I'd probably still be playing. But, I would say probably my 50-degree wedge. John, and you know how important, wedge play is, especially for somebody that doesn't hit the ball a long way, which I never did. So I had to be really good with my short clubs. So my 50-degree wedge, I mean, I just hit ball after ball after ball, making sure that I knew a comfortable 52 or 50-degree wedge went about 112 yards. I could make it go 115. I could back it down to 110 pretty easy, but 112 was just a normal swing every time. So anytime I got in that range where I was, 110 to 115 in the fairway, I didn't care where the pin was. I knew I could take that 50-degree wedge. And chances are it was going to be 12 feet or less, virtually 9 times out of 10, because I just hit that many of them in practice. Yeah.
I remember years ago a magazine cover. I think it was Golf Digest or Golf
Mm-hmm.
magazine,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like, and I'm not sure if this is paraphrasing, but it was like you were on the front cover, and it was like the reinvention or the remaking of Gary
Mm-hmm.
Koch. And
Mm-hmm.
specifically, you talked about, instead of trying to reach these par fives and two and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, you actually deliberately laid up to a certain spot where you could
Exactly.
hit that wedge the best.
Exactly. And back then it was a great game plan. I had part of it was created by my then instructor Peter Costas. We looked at my stats after 1983 when I won at Doral and finished top 20, top 25 on the money list. Had a really good year, But my par 5 play was just, it was horrendous. I was like 126th on the tour in birdieing par 5s. And, it was clear that I just didn't have a plan. So we went to work on these wedges, and, he forced me to put a lob wedge in. Said, look, you need a short wedge that you can hit 70 yards or whatever. Then you need another one that you can hit 95, and then you need another one that would be the 110, which was the 50 degrees. So all of a sudden I had a game plan based on what the par 5 hole looked like. We had a rule. I had a rule that year in 1984. If I couldn't carry the ball onto the green with my second shot, I would lay up. And I would lay up to one of those specific yardages, like 70, 95, or 112, 110, and get as close to those numbers as I could, because I knew that I was going to be able to hit a good wedge shot. Well, all of a sudden I went from 126th in birdie and par 5s to the top 20
Nice.
on the tour. And that was one of the reasons why I won twice and had 6 other top 10 finishes. I had a game plan, but I knew I had a part of my game that I could count on, virtually week after week.
All right. Well, our next question will be from Rick Barry, who's the Florida Sports Hall of Fame class of 1967.
All right.
Okay. The man who threw the underhanded free throw. Here we go.
Hey, Gary, your Florida Sports Hall of Fame compatriot, Rick Barry. Hope all is well with you. Can you please explain to the listeners how difficult it is and what you need to do to try to be good at the game of golf? I know you can't master it, because Jack Nicklaus told me it can never be mastered. I found it impossible to master, and the better I got, the more frustrated I get. So please help everybody out. Take care. Stay well.
Well, it's a great question. And I often say, if you actually went through the physics of what happens to try to hit a golf ball and to try to have it go where you want it to go, you'd probably never even try it. So, John, think about it. The back of the ball is what, half inch by half inch, something like that.
Yeah.
Sweet spot on the club is maybe an inch by 3/4 of an inch. And the sweet spot on the club moves away from the ball at the top of the backswing. It's probably 6 feet away from the half inch by half inch that you're trying to hit. So to bring that inch by 3/4 of an inch sweet spot back to that half inch by half inch back of the ball at exactly the right angle to make the ball go where you want to go, you'd think it would be impossible to do. So it just goes to show you how difficult this game really is, and how good the guys who play it at a high level really are, and how much time they put into it and how much effort goes with the practice. So, not surprising, Rick, that you would you would get more frustrated the better you got. I always found it was very interesting, and John, I'm sure you can appreciate this. When you do it right, it seems so easy. You make a nice smooth swing and the ball comes right off the middle of the club face and it goes, and it's like, well, that wasn't that hard. Why can't I do that more often? And the more the more you try, then the harder it becomes, and the better you get, the easier it is to be frustrated, no doubt about it.
It's almost like you're sitting in the office, you wad up a piece of paper and you throw it, and you hit it right in the trash can.
Sure.
But then the next 10 attempts, it just won't happen for you.
Right, because you're thinking about it. The first time you didn't think about it, you just did it. And I think that happens a lot with a lot of players, even average golfers. So, Barry, I always say this about golf. To me, it's one of the most difficult sports to play because the ball just sits there.
Yes.
Most other sports, when you think about it, it's a reaction to something.
Right.
If you and I are playing tennis and you serve the ball to me, I don't think, oh, I need to move my right foot, I need to move my left foot, I need to take the racket back, and I need to swing it through and turn my wrist over to make it dive and move away from the opponent.
React.
You don't have time to do that. Well,
Right.
with the golf ball just sitting there, and I see this so often with the average player, they just sit there and you can just see the wheels turning in their head. They're going through a checklist of 10 different things. All right, I need to make sure I shift my weight. I need to make sure I keep my left arm straight. I need to do that. Well, the mind gets so cluttered that, you have very little chance of actually striking the golf ball and hitting any kind of decent shot. And John, I think it's one of the reasons why we see so many of the tour players talk about their pre-shot routines. So when they're playing in competition, especially under pressure, they focus on the pre-shot routine, and the swing becomes a reaction to their pre-shot routine. So they've got something positive in mind, their pre-shot routine. The next thing you know, the swing happens and the ball just happens to get in the way. So very easy to see why the average player, the game is so difficult, no question.
So Gary, we'll get you out on this one. This question: what's the future hold for you? You've had a long storied career, but you're just not done yet. I know you're going to be redesigning a golf course here. What do you think the future holds for you in this game of golf?
Well, John, it's been so big a part of my life for so long. I mean, I literally started playing when I was 8 years old. So that's 63 years now. I still enjoy playing. I probably play a couple of times a week, maybe hit balls another day, something like that. I enjoy being out there. I enjoy being with my friends on the golf course. I still tell people, I get that same sense of satisfaction from hitting that one shot just the way I planned it. You visualize it, you picture it, you make the swing, and you look up and you go, oh yeah, that's it. Now, it doesn't happen nearly as often as it used to because I don't work at it like I used to, but I still get that same sense of satisfaction from it. So I think as long as that is still there, I'll continue to play. Beyond that, my work with the first tee will continue, for I hope years to come. We've done some amazing things. You mentioned the little short course that we just were able to open at our facility here in Tampa. Specifically for the kids and the younger kids, and they're absolutely loving it. But there are other things we can still do at that facility to improve it. I'm real big on. I don't know if you watched the match the other night from the park
Yeah,
in West
sure
Palm.
did.
Their program there actually includes a building where they kind of work with the kids from a school standpoint, from the STEM education stuff. So we're big on giving our kids college scholarships, but we need to help make sure that our kids are doing well enough in school that they'll have the ability to go to college and be accepted at colleges. So that's a big priority on my wish list for our first T chapter, is that at some point here in the next, hopefully not too distant future, we'll have a new building that'll include not only a simulator for them to be able to get on to work on their golf games, but a classroom setting with computers and that type thing where we can, get volunteer teachers in to help them with their education aspect of it as well. So, that part I can see myself staying with for a number of years to come. The golf course design stuff is fun. It's great. The opportunities seem to be fewer just because there's, less work being done. But, if those things come along, yeah, great. I'd love to do it. But, it'll be fun finishing up over at St. Pete Country Club to see what the finished product will look like. To be honest with you, I'll probably be spending a little more time in the summers up in North Carolina, getting out of the heat of Florida. I find the older I get, the harder it is to be around here in June, July, August, and September. So I could see that in the next few years happening as well.
Good for you.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, there we have it. Hall of Fame Conversations presented by Zini on Mic'd Up Social. And just remind everybody, you can download the app on Google and Apple Play, and these shows are archived also, so you could go back and revisit the show and your favorite Hall of Famer. We thank the Florida Sports Hall of Fame, and we thank Gary Koch, who had a wonderful career, and we really enjoyed your company today, your conversation. We wish you the best of luck, and thank you, Barry, for co-hosting the show. And that's it.
Oh.
Hall of Fame Conversations. Drive safe, everybody.